Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to do something that is, honestly, incredibly validating. We're going to take your most complex, confusing, and totally isolating feelings, and we're actually going to give them a name. Human emotion is just so messy, and a lot of the time, the English language completely fails us when we try to describe exactly what's going on inside our own heads. But today, by looking closely at some fascinating source material, we're going to bridge that gap together.
Okay, let's dive right in. I want you to think about walking through a super crowded space. Maybe you're waiting at a busy crosswalk in a bustling city, or you're just navigating your way through a packed shopping mall. Have you ever paused in that exact moment and suddenly realized that every single random passerby has a life just as complex, just as chaotic, and just as vivid as yours? It's a pretty heavy, almost dizzying thought, isn't it?
Or consider this highly specific yet universally understood scenario. Have you ever felt strangely moved just by standing in a completely empty stadium? Or maybe walking through a school hallway long after all the students have gone home? The architecture is exactly the same, right? But the energy is radically, almost hauntingly different.
Well, we can root these incredibly abstract human conditions directly in the original concepts of John Koenig. His project actually sought to fill the gaping holes in our language. By exploring his work today, we can start to unpack these complex emotional states and realize that, hey, we really aren't alone in experiencing them. Theme 1, our connection to others. Let's look at the push and pull dynamics of human intimacy.
So, this brings us to a word called Sonder. It perfectly captures that heavy, overwhelming realization we talked about just a minute ago. Sonder is that profound awakening that every random person passing you on the street is living a life just as vivid and complex as your own. They've got their own ambitions, their own friends, their own weird routines, and deep-seated worries. To them, you're literally just an extra in the background of their movie. It's this realization that simultaneously makes you feel incredibly small, yet profoundly connected to the whole human race. And our connection to other people can swing wildly between two absolute extremes. On one end of the spectrum, we've got limerence, which is this overwhelming, almost obsessive desire for extreme closeness and romantic infatuation. But on the exact opposite side of that coin is a feeling that is much, much harder to admit to. It's a sudden, jarring urge to build a giant wall and just push everyone away, even the people you love the absolute most. Which leads me to ask you directly, have you ever inexplicably pushed someone away for absolutely no reason at all? Like, you aren't mad at them, they didn't do anything wrong, but suddenly you just feel this overwhelming defensive instinct to isolate yourself, retreat into your shell, and totally cut off communication. Well, rest assured, you aren't broken. That sudden, jarring instinct actually has a name, derived from German roots, because of course it is, right? It's called Mauerbauer Traurigkeit. It literally translates to the sorrow of the wall builder. It's the inexplicable urge to push people away, a melancholy that drives you to isolate yourself, even when what you might actually need the most is connection. Honestly, it's just a standard, albeit frustrating, human glitch. Moving on to theme 2, echoes in empty spaces. Let's explore the emotional imprints left behind in our physical environments. Remember that empty stadium we mentioned at the very beginning? That eerie vibe of an abandoned, once bustling place is defined as Kenopsia. It's that forlorn, slightly creeping atmosphere of a place that is usually teeming with people, but is now abandoned and super quiet. Think of an empty school hallway at night, a deserted parking lot, or an office building on a holiday. The space just feels pregnant with the ghosts of the crowds that are usually there, and it creates a heavy, undeniable emotional response in us. Another really profound reaction to our environment is a feeling known as chrysalism. It's that amniotic tranquility and safety you feel when you're indoors during a massive thunderstorm. You can hear the rain just lashing against the windows, the wind is howling, and the chaos of nature is raging just outside your fragile walls. And yet, because you're inside, wrapped in a blanket, you feel an intense, cozy peace. It's the pure joy of being sheltered from a storm. When we group these highly specific feelings together, terms like Kenopsia and Vellichor serve as a kind of map. Just as Kenopsia deals with emptiness, Vellichor maps our reaction to spaces steeped in the heavy passage of time. Our environment is never just a passive backdrop, it actively pulls emotions out of us based entirely on context and atmosphere. But what about our connection to history itself? Have you ever experienced a deep, aching nostalgia for a time period you never actually lived in? Like, have you ever looked at old sepia-toned photographs of the 1920s or watched grainy home videos from the 1980s and felt a profound sense of homesickness for an era that happened way before you were even born? That haunting nostalgia for the impossible is beautifully captured by the word anemoia. It's a wistfulness for a time you never knew. And honestly, it proves that our empathy and our emotional capacity aren't just limited to our own direct experiences. We can actively grieve the loss of a past we never even had the chance to touch. Crazy, right? Theme 3, the boundaries of self. Let's move deeply inward to examine the heavy limitations of our own existence. If we explore our existential scale, we see words like Sonder, Occhiolism, and onism popping up. They all tackle that heavy weight. They're all variations of waking up to how incredibly limited our singular perspective truly is when placed against the massive backdrop of the universe. Take Occhiolism, for example. It's the sudden awareness of the smallness of your own perspective. You realize you can't possibly draw any meaningful conclusions about the universe because, well, you're just one tiny set of eyes. And onism takes that a step further. It's the sheer frustration of being stuck in just one single body, constrained to inhabit only one place at a time. It's that feeling you get looking at the departures board at an airport, realizing all the places you're never going to go and all the lives you're never going to get to live, simply because you're anchored to your single, solitary existence. Which brings us right to the core purpose of today's explainer. By translating these obscure sorrows into a clear, distinct vocabulary, we take feelings that once made us feel deeply isolated, crazy, or totally alone, and we realize they're a completely shared part of the human condition. Giving a feeling a name acts as a bridge. It tells you that someone else, somewhere out there, felt this exact same abstract, strange emotion deeply enough to actually write it down and define it. So to wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you lingering on your own introspection. Which of these obscure feelings hits home for you the most? Think about it. The next time you feel a pang of unnamed sorrow, just remember, you aren't experiencing a glitch in your hardware. You're just discovering a part of the human experience that finally has a name. Thank you so much for joining me today, and keep paying attention to those quiet moments.